Along with extra time and lower instances of unpredictable weather, there are a variety of benefits that come with fall ESN application. Learn more at smartnitrogen.com.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And also a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast as well. It is great to have everybody here joining us to talk about the biggest issues of the week. And we've got a great show for you here today. Tyler McCann, Managing Director at CAPI, will be with us. He's a regular on the program as well. Kelvin Heppner of RealAgriculture will be with us. Lindsay is off today, a very well-deserved day off. She has been running hard. And really, there's just, it's been a very busy couple weeks from a news perspective. So Lindsay is off today and getting some things done in the sheep operation, which I'm sure is not exactly a slow day whatsoever. We'll also today have a beef market update with Ann Wasko of the Gateway Livestock Exchange. I want to dig in with Ann. What is going on with these prices? We're seeing prices continue to move higher this week in the United States. We've got some basis issues in Canada. I want to talk about some of the carcass weights too. Heavy carcasses right now. And I want to talk to Ann about the why of that. Is that all feed cost related or what is happening there? And a whole lot more. And hey, if you have any feedback on today's show, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the RealAg feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. Really love your feedback. Appreciate your feedback. And please keep it coming. I've had a lot of feedback this week on C282. And what's been interesting about that, okay, and we're going to talk about 282 today on the show, but what I've been hearing from the audience is there are not everybody in the supply managed sector is necessarily all in favor of 282. And this is the private members bill that would prevent Canada from giving up market access in future trade agreements when it comes to supply managed commodities like dairy, chicken, turkey, eggs, things like that. Now, so I think in a lot of cases, politicians, especially in the House, people voted for 282. It got through the House because it was like, are you for or against supply management? In the case of now being discussed in the Senate, we're talking a little bit more of it from the merits of trade and things like that. Now, if you can be, and I know this is difficult for people because there's just not a lot of nuance in today's world, but you can be against 282 and still be for supply management. That is possible. Now, that is lost on some, and we are continuing to try to get the Dairy Farmers of Canada, a representative from there, to come on this show and talk about why they feel it's critical that 282 does pass and become law, to make sure that we're getting all sides of the story. We'll continue to reach out to them. CFA is on the record. That's another organization that we talked to Scott Ross and his staff all the time. We'll try to next week maybe get them on the program as well. I've got my particular opinions on 282 and what I think should happen or not happen, but I want to hear yours as well. shaney@realagriculture.com. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we got Ann Wasko here from the Gateway Livestock Exchange, and then Kelvin and Tyler will be with us to talk about all the issues on the issues panel. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Get ready for tillage season with the high-speed disc from Brandt. Cut and size residue, create ideal seed beds, and level ruts faster than any other tillage machine. It's a better field finish and fewer passes, so you can stay on schedule no matter what fall throws at you. And right now, you can get yours with a $12,000 rebate. There's never been a better time to bring your operation up to speed. Visit Brandt.ca for details.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. I am Lindsay Smith. Joining me now is Amy Crozier. She's the Senior Ag Specialties Rep for Nutrient, thinking about removal, but also thinking about nutrient uptake. So what our crop is going to need. How do we put those two things together when we're thinking about our purchasing decisions for the next year?
So it's very important to soil test. Know your geography. Are we short on water? Is our yield potential 30? Is our yield potential 50? Understanding what we're going for and aiming for, what's in our soil. Did we have disease issues? Did we have low proteins? Did we not meet our expectations? Is there nothing left in the tank when we're finishing off our crop? Did we have maturity issues? So all these different things put together can help influence those decisions. Maybe we want to change our strategy to have some season-long feeding products, depending on what our soil test tells us and what our crop is telling us when we're taking it off.
Where can farmers and their advisors go for more information?
You can go to our website, it's smartnitrogen.com.
It's now time for the beef market update here on RealAg Radio. Hey, you're invited to the Future Fertilizer Tour. Learn about the proposed Genesis Fertilizers facility and learn about ownership opportunities, facility progress, and credible partners. Tour starts October 28th. Visit genesisfertilizers.com/future to register. Joining us, of course, like she does every 2 weeks for the beef market update, is Ann Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. Ann, how are we doing on this Friday?
I'm good, Shaun. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. Doing good. And hey, you know what's doing well is some of these markets in the beef sector. What give us an update and then the why of it.
Okay, sure. Well, another great week south of the border. So in the U.S., South Texas, Kansas, markets were up $2 this week, 190. In the north, so that Nebraska area, 190 to 192. That's 3 to 4 higher than last week. And dressed in the north at 298 delivered. That's also up $2 from last week. So just very strong markets, just continue to move solidly higher. And great support. The cutout, of course, we talked a bit about this, 2 weeks ago, but certainly last week. This week, it continued to move another $2 higher. The choice cutout closed last night at 321. It did show some signs maybe of topping earlier this week, Shaun. The chuck primal started to come off, but the loin and the rib cutouts, especially as we head into holiday season, that's where a lot of the strength is coming from. And again, giving some great support, to packer margins, and then also helping, give the reason to bid more for these fat cattle. So that's been great. The choice select spread, one thing to watch as we've moved these markets higher, it's widened out to $27 right now. So, for those that are selling on grids, for example, or formula sales that are based on grade, that's really going to be adding to the bottom line. And certainly when we see that kind of spread widen at this time of the year, that's largely due to the demand for that holiday rib, etc. So they're going to want choice in terms of those specific holiday products. So that's kind of exciting.
Is that kind of the max for that spread?
Well, no, we can get into the 30s, but that's certainly as wide as it's been for some time. So no, it's not anything record or anything, but certainly kind of solidifying the fact that this is, holiday demand related, if you will. Yep. We do have a U.S. cattle on feed report coming out this afternoon, and right now the trade is expecting on-feed numbers to be about the same as a year ago. September placements, the forecast is down 4%, and September marketings, the forecast is up 2%. So we'll see how that comes out, but that's kind of what the markets, futures have dialed in, if you will. Now, we did have our report here in Western Canada last week. Canfax put that out. Same trend we've been seeing. Our on-feed numbers on October 1st were down. Our September placements were down. From a placement perspective, Shaun, that was the 5th consecutive month of smaller year-over-year placements compared to 23 for us here in Canada. I do think that's going to change in October. We've seen, we talked a lot about this over the last few months, how slow things have been to get going, but it has been busy in October. So I think when Canfax comes out with their October placement numbers with the November report, that we will see things have picked up. But it has been slow in terms of these placement patterns here in Western Canada. Just staying on the Western Canadian market for a second, Shaun. The fat cattle market didn't change here. We were still steady this week. Pretty quiet trade, limited trade, 403 to 405 delivered. That's going to leave that weekly Canfax average probably around 241. We've been there for a little while now, but because the U.S. market is marching higher, that means our basis has widened. And I think when we get the final data in, we're going to be close to -20 this week on the spot sales. Yeah.
Feeders don't want to see that.
No. Now, I think, there's been quite a bit of forward contract activity done in preparation for this, because the fall is the fourth quarter, especially early in the fourth quarter, has turned into be kind of a weak basis period for Western Canadian fat cattle. So I think cattle feeders are doing more contracting in terms of trying to mitigate that basis risk.
Yeah, does that push more fat cattle south then, if you can?
Well, we've been doing that all year long, and I certainly think with the -20, you're going to see more interest from U.S. packers for sure.
Okay. And packer profitability, it's a thing. I heard one number this week in the U.S. over $60.
Yeah, I think certainly with that cutout jumping like it did, if you remember, we got down to just under $3, and then we closed this week at just over $3.21 on the choice cutout. So that certainly has turned the packer margin around, and again, really given them this impetus to get some inventory around them going into the holiday season.
Yeah, so profitability for the producer. So we got the packer making money. Profitability for producers right now. Do we have all three in this triangle?
Well, cattle feeder could be sketchy.
It depends. There's a lot of variables there.
And if he's finishing yearlings right now or heavier cattle that were not, no risk management per se or no basis contracts, he's probably in the red on those. Some calves potentially that are still in the mix could still be in the black. So a cattle feeder in Western Canada is probably really, I guess the simplest way to say it is it depends.
and you mentioned the holiday time of the year. I think traditionally, probably a lot of people don't think of, U.S. Thanksgiving and Christmas as beef kind of demand times, but has that changed over history?
Oh, and this has been a solid time frame for beef demand for quite some time, in terms of especially of those specific holiday rib items. I would say, certainly in recent history, it's been, right up there in terms of moving into that early grilling season that we see in the spring, and maybe more so for this specific holiday rib, if you will. It's really turned into a feature item that consumers want to see on their table for this holiday season.
What's pushing those carcass weights?
First of all, here in Canada, our steer carcass weight reached 969 last week. That is big. It's 19 pounds over the 5-year average, 10 pounds over last year. The only year that beats it is the 2022, where we still were dealing with that COVID backlog of cattle, and we were having special meetings to talk about these heavy carcass weights. Well, here we are, right, almost back there again. So we are behind in our marketings here in the West, and I do think that's impacting this basis. Kind of all comes part and parcel, if you will.
Oh, fascinating stuff. Hey, Ann, thanks so much for joining us here this week for the Beef Market Update. Have yourself a great weekend.
You too. Thanks, Shaun.
Hey, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
Your co-op grow team are your local experts, because we live here too. Our agronomic specialists stay up to date with the latest research and technology to help support your entire farm operation. Talk to our team for advice tailored to your farm's needs. We have recommendations to help you optimize your crop yield and quality while enhancing the health of your land. Co-op. We're all growing together. Here for your farm. Here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup to weed control, field trial results, and the latest yield strategies. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast in your favorite podcast app. Check out the latest Corn School episode today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday for the for the Real Ag Issues panel. Let's talk about New Farm first. There's soil-active herbicides like Velterra EZ and Fierce EZ from the company. Get ahead of hard-to-kill weeds. Spray this fall for up to 8 weeks of extended weed control next spring. Find out more by going to New Farm's website, newfarm.ca. A great lineup of pre-emergent soil-active herbicides from New Farm. Okay, let's bring the panel in here. We've got Kelvin Heppner coming in out of Altona, Manitoba. Hey, Kelvin, how are we doing?
Doing well here, Shaun. The sun is shining, and we're enjoying another beautiful fall day here in southern Manitoba.
You're getting a bit of an extended fall, aren't you? This is nice.
It has been, yeah. We've done. I talked a bit about this last week. We've done more fall field work and fertilizer application than what we've done the last few falls, just because we have the time and window right now. So, yep, catching up on things before the snow flies, which of course this time of year could happen anytime.
Yeah, it always is kind of an abrupt shock when it does come. It eventually, it's coming.
Parts of Alberta this week had some of that white blanket.
Monday morning, I tried to open the door to my Jeep, and it was frozen shut. We had some rain and cold weather. Terrible. But it's supposed to be beautiful this weekend, I think. So that's living in southern Alberta. Also joining us is Tyler McCann, Managing Director at CAPI. Tyler, how are we doing?
I'm doing well, Shaun. I had to put a toque on this morning when I went out to the barn, so we've had a pretty nice fall, but it's getting a little bit colder in the Ottawa Valley too.
When you wear your toque, or for a beanie for some of our audience, if you wear that toque, what style are you rolling with? Are you going with the tight one? Or are you going with the big one with the pom-pom on top? What kind of toque is Tyler McCann rolling with?
I wear a tight one. Actually, it's from Ag in the Classroom, the toque that I'm sporting these days. So had an Alta Genetics toque that disappeared. I think one of my kids might have taken it, but now rocking the Ag in the Classroom swag and supporting the good cause and the good work they do.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Okay, Kelvin, this week, Bank of Canada, 50 basis points, big drop. What's been kind of the reaction? What do you think about it?
Yeah, 50. It seemed like the consensus kind of changed out of nowhere in the week or two leading up to the Bank of Canada decision this week. There had been talk about 225 basis points cuts here before the end of the year, and all of a sudden consensus was 50 basis points, maybe even 75. And in the end, Bank of Canada announced this 50 basis point decrease, and so yeah, we've seen the Canadian dollar weaken a bit on this news. Even yesterday, it was still softening. Yesterday, as the market is digesting this decision, and so I'm not sure if that's great in terms of our cost side of things, but for Canadian exports, that's not bad, or that's not a bad thing. So yeah, I think certainly on the farmland investment side of things and investing in capital we're not going to see the softening of the farmland market that maybe some people had expected as interest rates decrease. Although at the same time, commodity prices have we know the margins are tightened up, but yeah, with lower interest rates, I expect that FCC farmland values report is going to continue in the same direction it has for the last decade.
Yeah, and this week we put out our Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index survey for October, and we asked farmers, what do they think about direction of land prices, and the percentages either way, up or down. That'll be interesting to see those results next week and what farmers are thinking. I agree with you. I don't think we're going to see much of even though we are concerned about profitability and the cash flow side of the equation, the long-term investment of land still holds. Tyler, I guess between now and whenever the Canadian election is, maybe sooner than later or later than sooner, we're not really sure at this point. Do you think the economy is going to be a big driver of how Canadians make their decision when they get to the polls?
It certainly seems like it's going to be, Shaun, and I think if you look at what's happening in the United States right now, a lot of interest and action around inflation. It seems like that is what's driving the success that Donald Trump is seeing these days. I think in the Canadian context, there's a lot more uncertainty, and I think the Liberals seem to think that the economy is going to get better and it's going to improve things. But if you look at some of the challenges that we have, the interest rates coming down is a good thing. But and we'll get into immigration later. There's this risk that actually we may end up in a recession. Somebody I read this morning that had immigration not driven population up over the last year, the Canadian economy could have been in a recession. And so I think you have to see how all of these forces play out. There's a lot more uncertainty, and I think that gives an advantage to the Conservatives in the broader context.
So if that's true, where does Canada go? Let's talk about immigration. Kelvin, there's a big plan here for by the Liberals to cut the amount of people immigrating to the country.
Yeah, this was the big announcement yesterday, and this immigration reduction plan, or a plan for the next 3 years, setting a bunch of targets. And this is something where I think this is a major overcorrection that has happened here. It's like when you're driving down a gravel road or an icy road and you're going to hit the ditch on one side, and the Canadian economy and society in many ways was headed towards the ditch, as we saw the pressure from immigration on housing and on our healthcare system and so many other services that government provides. They were headed to the ditch on one side, and they have, with yesterday's announcement, cranked the steering wheel over and are going to crash on the other side potentially here. As Tyler alluded to, the importance of immigration to our economy in terms of increasing demand and preventing that recession the last few years, in terms of filling jobs that we are having major trouble filling with people that are already living in Canada. And so yesterday's plan, basically the government, this isn't the net number, but on one of the lines, they're expecting 2.3 million non-permanent residents to leave, which is essentially going to result in decreased overall demand, which is supposed to reduce pressure on the housing market and that type of thing, which could be positive. So, but at the same time, I don't know, this is, to me, this is a major change in direction here and going to certainly increase the risk of recession, of sudden drop in demand on many fronts. It has potential to be an overcorrection, I would say.
Tyler?
Yeah, I think it kind of feels sorry for any business trying to navigate workforce challenges these days. I mean, the whiplash that I think that we may see we are seeing on immigration, that we may see on other files as the government, again, really overcorrects to try and better position the Liberal Party and make it more appealing. There's lots of kind of talk in Ottawa around what we might see in a fall economic statement, but I think that the sense of overcorrection is likely going to come up over and over and over again. The thought that we may be in a position where the Canadian population's actually declining because the government's had to ratchet things down it's a hard thing to get your head wrapped around, I think. And I'm not sure we really understand what the consequences of all of this are. But I think that's a bit of something that we see often with decisions coming out of the government, is that that sense of what the consequences might be or what the impacts of the government decisions are not always as well thought out as they should be.
Yeah, to me it speaks of rudderlessness. Like you don't really, you're just kind of like going with the whims of what may get you another couple months. Like it just seems like a real backpedal from where they were not too long ago. And listen, like you said, housing prices it is a big issue. Affordability of housing is a major issue in Canada, especially if you look at some of the major cities like Toronto and Vancouver. This just seems like there's more negatives potentially coming from this decision than the problem you were trying to fix, maybe. I don't know. Kelvin, sorry I cut you off.
Well, two things. If 2.3 million non-permanent residents leave, that's approximately 5.7% of Canada's population today. That's a significant dent in overall demand. And to the point of your rudderlessness comment, Shaun, it was about a year ago that there was a group of Atlantic MPs standing behind Justin Trudeau as he announced that there would not be a carbon tax on home heating in Atlantic or across Canada, but in Atlantic Canada, where they heavily rely on oil for home heating. To me, that's another example of this, or this is the latest example of where this government tries to take a stance on something and ultimately licks their finger, holds it up in the air, and figures out which way the wind is blowing. And it sure seems to take a long time, but the rudderlessness, I think, this is the latest example of it from this Liberal government.
Do we have any idea where the Conservatives, what their position will be on immigration?
I think the Conservatives would have moved in this direction, but probably not this extreme. And so this, I think, goes beyond that. Tyler talked about this improving the Liberal government's prospects. I think in many ways this just takes away an advantage that the Conservatives had in terms of the politics of this, where where Canadian consensus on immigration has remained an outlier compared to many countries around the world in how supportive of immigration we have been. That support has certainly been heavily damaged here in the last couple of years. And I think the Conservatives were recognizing that, needing to pull back what was happening. Yeah. And now the Liberals have kind of taken away that issue potentially. I think more than anything politically, that is what has happened with this announcement yesterday.
Okay, we got to take a break. Well, go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, just going to say that the Conservatives are already out with an ad on social media with the tagline that the Liberals broke the immigration system and they can't be trusted to fix it. I expected that to continue to resonate with a lot of Canadians.
Yeah. Okay, hey, we're going to be right back on RealAg Radio for the RealAg Issues panel. Shaun, Haney, Kelvin, Heppner, and Tyler McCann back with you right after this.
If you only listen to RealAg Radio, you only get half the picture. For greater insight into the issues that affect farming, tune in to RealAgriculture.com. Crops, livestock, machinery, farm management, and the markets, even food and travel. Real Agriculture Online digs deeper into the topics that affect the way you work and live. So get connected today. Read, watch, and listen to the people who know at RealAgriculture.com.
What were the issues in your fields this year? Did you do a soil sample? What is your soil sample telling you about some of the nutrient issues that you might be having going into next year? What herbicides did you use? What residues you might be concerned about? What weed issues did you have? What crop residues did you have? How well do you know your fields?
Get the answers to all the questions you have about your pulse crop at the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday. We got Tyler McCann, Managing Director at CAPI, Kelvin Heppner of Real Agriculture, and myself, Shaun Haney. Okay, we got lots of stuff to chat about here. This has been one of those weeks where it just feels like it keeps on coming. The news cycle is definitely delivering for sure. But first, before we get to some of those issues, calling all Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, northern Minnesota growers, the new seed omega-3 canola production system can help you unlock a guaranteed path to a market with attractive premium opportunities. First-in-class agronomy support and free on-farm pickup after harvest. To learn more, go to omega3canola.com. Okay, Liberal caucus meeting. I know you guys talked about it last week on the panel. And what some thought was going to happen, it sort of under-delivered from a drama standpoint, Kelvin.
Yeah, we saw this letter that apparently 24 Liberal MPs have signed asking Trudeau to reconsider whether he stays on as leader. And there was also talk and they apparently presented this letter, although the names of who has signed it weren't divulged at the meeting. They also presented him with an October 28th deadline for deciding whether he's going to run again, and also talking about having a secret ballot among the caucus. But it took the Prime Minister less than 24 hours to take those comments under review and say, yeah, I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to lead the Liberals in the next election. And so I think some of those MPs that were not satisfied and were seeking a leadership change are disappointed. But there's sure a lot of tiptoeing here, and not a lot of, I'm not sure if courage is the right word, but there's not a lot of people sticking their neck out in terms of going on the record and really launching or showing leadership in terms of pushing a leadership change. It's all happening behind closed doors and not even letting the Prime Minister know who it is. And there was talk again about a secret ballot, and that's something where apparently the Prime Minister's office in that caucus meeting pushed back or had other MPs go up and speak out against the secret ballot. That's always a dangerous situation for a leader. We saw Aaron O'Toole, who was leader of the Conservatives, face a secret ballot in caucus that led to his defeat. And apparently in that case, he had a bunch of MPs that had verbally told him they backed him, but then when it came to the actual vote, a secret ballot, the vote that they recorded was different. And I think there's a good chance that Justin Trudeau would face the same thing if caucus went to a secret ballot, but that has been staved off for now. And so, yeah, it looks like the Prime Minister is going to survive this minor challenge, this soft challenge from this maybe 24 MPs that came to a head at caucus meeting on Wednesday.
He called their bluff. right? It's sort of like you're going to rip this from my cold, dead hands. Is essentially what he's saying at this point.
But Shaun, I'm sure if the Prime Minister was confident he'd win that secret ballot, he'd support it and let it happen and settle this issue once and for all. And I think that speaks to the reality that this is an issue that's not going to go away. So he survived his caucus meeting. There's talk of a cabinet shuffle coming up here soon. The reality is if you have 24, 25 caucus members that have been willing to put their name on a piece of paper, that says to me that there are certainly lots of unrest and a lot of potential for this to continue to drag on until the Prime Minister does leave, until we get to an election or the Prime Minister changes his mind.
Well, but confident people can make dumb decisions. David Cameron with Brexit. Hey, let's take it to a vote. Let's look how that worked out, right? Yeah. Kelvin gave the example of Aaron O'Toole. Like sometimes if you to his credit, I guess maybe it's being aware of how two-faced people are sometimes in terms of, I got your back, buddy. I'm good. Like, don't you worry. You need to be the leader. And then, got to get rid of him. sort of a kind of scenario for sure. Hey, Bill C-282. What would a Friday be without talking about this thing? Had numerous calls this week from the audience on Bill C-282. There was a lot of lobbying that was happening in Ottawa this week in Ottawa, Kelvin, sorry. And 282 is definitely part of the narrative.
Yeah, there's a number of different things that are happening around this legislation right now. This is the bill that would prevent the Canadian government, Canadian trade negotiators from making new concessions on supply management in future trade talks. And so the Senate's Trade Committee, Foreign Affairs Committee held a couple more meetings this week, hearing from witnesses on both sides of this issue. Farm groups on both sides of this issue were represented, including the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. And you mentioned lobbying happening in Ottawa this week. CFA had their lobby day or lobby week, and so CFA is on the record as supporting C-282. And yet we saw the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan, APAS, which is the Saskatchewan General Farm Organization that represents Saskatchewan farmers in CFA, in the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. The Saskatchewan group, APAS, has come out publicly dissenting from CFA here. And we know that this has been an issue internally in the National Farm Organization, as not everybody around that table agrees on 282 and whether it should move ahead. And so APAS, of course, Saskatchewan still has some supply managed production, but heavily reliant on exports of grains and oilseeds and pulses. And so APAS publicly speaking out against 282. We also know that the House of Commons Ag Committee is drafting a letter. I'm not sure where it's at, but the House of Commons Ag Committee, it sounds like, will be sending a letter to the Senate calling on them to pass 282. So this is the bloc leveraging, the bloc representative on the House Ag Committee leveraging some other politicking and horse trading that's happening there to have the committee, which includes some conservative MPs like John Barlow and others, drafting this letter in support of 282, calling on the Senate to pass it.
I got an email from a listener, Henry, who's a dairy farmer. I'm not sure which province he farms in, but Henry's quite upset about 282. And it's quite a long email. I'm not going to read it, but I'll paraphrase. Essentially upset that the supply managed sector is going in bed with the separatist and the bloc, and basically really tearing apart the fabric of going against some of the other commodity groups and some of the peers in agriculture. He's quite upset about it and tired of being used as leverage in these kinds of situations. Tyler, I'm curious, Tyler, that's one of the things that's happened here is that 282 is not a referendum on whether or not you support supply management. It's how you should approach trade going forward is really what this is about.
That's right. And, I've got a lot of respect for the people in the leadership at the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, but I find it hard to believe that an organization, any of these farm organizations that are supposed to be representing the broad interests of agriculture have picked a side on an issue like this. I really think that the best thing that they should be doing is sitting it out, because it is a very divisive issue. And it is unfortunate because I think it gets, as you say, gets made into this bigger thing about, do you support supply management or not? I think that there's a lot of room for improvement in any system. Supply management's not perfect. It works for those farmers that are in it. But you can say that and still say 282 is a bad bill. And I actually think one of the reasons why 282's a bad bill, I mean, I think it's bad for the country. I think it's bad for the broader economy. But I also think it's bad for supply managed farmers because it gives them some sort of assurance, or it gives them this idea that they're going to think that supply management is going to be protected. But the reality is that no government will give up a trade deal to protect supply management, especially if you look at what might happen with the NAFTA renegotiation or the CUSMA renegotiation. The governments are going to make whatever concessions that they need to make, and nobody should be under any kind of influence that 282 is going to prevent those concessions from happening.
To me,
yeah,
I am, if I put my farmer hat on, I am a supply managed farmer. We have chickens. And so I'm getting my personal opinion out here would be that I agree that both sides, I think, have this wrong. I think that, as Tyler just alluded to, no government is going to not sign a trade deal because of this. So to me, the damage that this does to trade is being overstated by the pro-trade groups. But on the other side of things, this is not necessarily good for the long-term longevity and health of the supply managed sector either. If we're putting a target on the industry and asking the countries that we're negotiating with, basically, here's this large thing that we're going to put on the table here or we're taking off the table, making it obvious and just putting all these red flags around it. Or construction tape around it. I'm not sure what it would look like visually, but it's untouchable. Well, that's asking for it to be sought after in trade negotiations. And so to me, this is short-sighted on both arguments. In some ways are short-sighted around this.
But again, you've just and I appreciate your personal opinion on this, Kelvin. That's the whole point. Then why do it? If no country, including Canada, is going to, give up a trade, we're not going to give up the USMCA or CUSMA agreement because of supply and like, what is the whole point of this besides just an exercise in political positioning? It just seems like a total waste of time. And there's so much stuff that we do need to be working on. We have a situation we have a U.S. election in 10 days now, or 11 days. And there's a lot of talk about tariffs. We got, making supply chains in agriculture. I saw an interview with J.D. Vance in a town hall talking about how we're relying on too many other countries for our agricultural supply chains. Who do you think that is about? It isn't about China. It could be about China. It's also about Canada, everybody. Wake up. I just think we're worried. We're talking about the wrong stuff. I don't know. That's my personal opinion. Tyler?
Well, I think you're right, Shaun. So Kelvin declared his bias. I'll declare mine. Yeah, we have beef cows at home. I need the beef market in Canada to be able to export that beef around the world, and I need that to happen in a way that encourages growth and prosperity. I think that there should be lots of opportunity there. But I also think it's true. The negative impact of 282 is probably overstated by some, but the reality is it makes the life of our negotiators and our governments harder. And if we are going to be in a position where we're going to have to navigate a Trump administration and the possible really significant negative consequences on it and cross-border trade between Canada and the United States, but also in global trade around the world, we need to have as much flexibility and give our governments kind of the room that they're going to need to maneuver to make sure that the kind of the negative consequences and impact. And I really think that there could be pretty significant negative consequences on Canada are as minimal as possible.
Yeah, I feel like we've been saying for months around this place that Canada is like, hey, flag on the backpack, and here's a postcard of a beaver and a bottle of maple syrup. It's not going to go over. The political climate is changed south of the border. And it's on both sides of the aisle, it is moving more protectionist. And that is not good for Canada. And I'm not sure that everybody is fully woken up to what is unfolding in front of us. And it's a major threat to not only our agricultural economy, but a whole bunch of other stuff that happens in Canada as well. And we can't wake up too late on it. Okay, we got to take a break. We've got more coming up here on the Real Ag Issues panel. Shaun Haney, Kelvin Heppner, Tyler McCann. Be back right after this.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday. Shaun Haney, your host, joined by Kelvin Heppner of RealAgriculture and Tyler McCann, Managing Director at CAPI. Hey, along with extra time and lower instances of unpredictable weather, there are a variety of benefits that come with the fall ESN application. Learn more at smartnitrogen.com. Okay, this week we had a report out. It's an annual report that comes out, Kelvin. It comes out from the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity, CCFI, looking at, surveying consumers and how they feel about the food system and agriculture in general. This year's edition took a little bit more of maybe an unexpected negative turn in terms of how people view our food system.
Yeah, exactly. The public trust research that was released this week at the Public Trust Summit in Toronto, our own Bern Tobin was there, and you can listen to an interview that he did on this study at realagriculture.com. There were a number of metrics in the survey results this year that turned negative and moved by a significant margin. So the research showed that only 31% of Canadians believe the food system is on the right track. That's a 3-point drop from last year. At the same time, 29% feel the system is headed in the wrong direction, marking the first time in nearly a decade that the public is now basically evenly divided on whether they feel Canada's food system is on the right or wrong track. There's other metrics here, such as 45% of Canadians hold a favorable view of Canada's food system, which is down 7 points from 2023. Negative impressions of the Canadian food system have surged, nearly doubling, well, not quite doubling, from 11% to 18%. And so a number of different measurements here moving in the wrong direction. And it's certainly not a good sign when negativity and cynicism and distrust are growing in farming and agriculture and our industry in Canada.
Did they have any particular the why? Okay, so that if those levels are coming down, why are they coming down?
Well, I think that's the challenge with this type of market research is the why is harder to understand. And my theory might be here that food prices, there's been so much focus on how expensive food has become over the last number of years. The actual survey results showed that concern about food prices had eased slightly in 2024 versus 2023, a 3 percentage point improvement. But I wonder whether there's still this overall negativity vibe around food and our food system right now because of how expensive prices certainly haven't dropped back to where they were. And so while inflation has slowed down dramatically, food still seems relatively expensive in our minds. And so I wonder if that isn't a shadow over this whole, all of these questions.
Man, that makes sense. So, Tyler, what's your reaction, Tyler? So what?
Yeah, I mean, first, I want to highlight that it really is good that the CCFI is doing this work on behalf of its members and the broader industry. I think we often take consumers for granted in agriculture. They really are the reason why we do everything that we do, and we need to have a better understanding of how they think about the system, and we should be thinking about what that means for the work that the rest of us are doing. But, clearly food inflation, the fact that food is more expensive, that people are feeling the pressure, I think has got to play a really important role. And I think when we think about what we do, there's some really kind of interesting insights around trust and kind of the perception that people have. I think that we need to be careful often, and we want to go to the kind of the ramparts and say, we just need to tell our story better. If only people knew and appreciated it. And I really don't think that is going to get us as far as we like to think that it is, because sometimes people actually do disagree with what we think about agriculture, right? We think about responsible pesticide use. But I think that there's probably a lot of Canadians out there that would say, we're not really convinced that kind of there is a good way to be doing these things. I think we have to really be thoughtful when we think about kind of the difference between trust and engagement. And sometimes, a consumer that doesn't understand these things but still goes to the store, still buys the food is kind of the best outcome at the end of the day for agriculture and food.
It's not realistic for us to expect consumers to understand the complexity of agriculture. We don't even understand it working and covering agriculture on a daily basis. It's a complex industry with tons of nuance. And so, I think Tyler's point there that we probably need to be more strategic in communications, not necessarily just the whole tell your story type of approach to it.
I'd be interested in some of the political biases in terms of are conservatives versus liberal leaning Canadians more trusting, less trusting of some of this data? That would be kind of an interesting split. And the reason I say that is
seeing it play out in the U.S. right now.
Exactly. I'm thinking of RFK Jr. and some of the things that he's been saying about make America healthy again, and some of that is definitely not on pace with mainstream agriculture. Now, I have heard from some of the audience that people are like, yeah, you know what? I'm not worried about it. He's never going to have a position that's going to have any sort of impact. But others I've heard from have said that, we could use a bit of a shakeup in the industry. And I can buy into some of the things that he's saying. I don't know. Personally, I'm a little bit concerned about some of the stuff I'm hearing. RFK Jr. as the head of the USDA, as the secretary, or at the EPA spells big-time problems for agriculture in the U.S. And quite frankly, it won't be good for Canada either, Tyler.
Yeah, I think that a lot of farmers in Canada think that the grass is greener on the southern side of the border. But I think if RFK Jr. is in either one of those jobs, Shaun, we might be very, very thankful that we've got the system that we have. And all of a sudden, even a Liberal government in Canada might not seem as bad as things are in the United States with RFK Jr. making decisions around, again, what crop protection products farmers can use, kind of where subsidies are going and where they're not. That'll be careful what you wish for is all I could say.
Now, Politico had a list of names that could be the potential secretary, depending on who wins, former President Trump or Vice President Harris, and it's a pretty close, too close to call at this point. Interesting names thrown around of a whole bunch of natures and backgrounds. It's going to be maybe a bit of an interesting meeting between who's on that list and Minister McCauley, if he is still, the ag minister after a cabinet shuffle. I don't rule out Tom Vilsack not coming back. If Harris wins, all the way down to a Sid Miller from Texas. Of course, RFK is a potential. Who else was on that list that caught your eye there, Tyler?
I think it's interesting to see. So we had Ted McKinney, Kip Tom on the Republican side. I mean, I think these are well-known figures. Again, Sid Miller may be a little bit more out there, but it is by and large, I think we get the sense that, that kind of rural conservative base is still going to have a very strong voice, a strong presence in a Trump cabinet. Again, I think it seems a little bit more uncertain on the Democrat side, but I think we do forget, especially in the Canadian context, that there are still rural Democrats out there. There are still kind of Democratic representatives on the House and the Senate committees that do have strong perspective, and that probably wouldn't be that big of a change from what we see today.
I'll say this: the Republicans have RFK Jr. and that disaster if he was heading up USDA. The Democrat version is Senator Cory Booker. I think that's a wreck, and he's on the Senate Ag Committee, so he's around agriculture. I don't think Senator Booker would be that. That's in the same category of.
Shaun,
they can't put Booker in that seat.
Yeah, I think that's the difference, is that I don't think the Democrats will put an insane choice in that seat. I think that there's a really real choice, that the chance that Trump does, and the consequences of that, again, are hard to wrap your head around.
Something really sobering, for sure, is, let's take it to world affairs, North Korean troops in Russia. And what that could mean and look like if they do engage. We also had the BRICS party, so to speak, leaders from and trying to increase the influence and the membership into BRICS. Kelvin, this is like one of those moments. I don't want to be too hyperbolic about it, but it's pretty concerning.
Yeah, and I think I've been quite skeptical of the whole BRICS idea and concept in the past, as these are countries that, sure, they have economic things in common, goals in common, but politically and societally don't have a lot in common. And so I'm still not convinced that this whole BRICS concept of creating a different kind of another pole in the world to counter the Western alliance, counter the U.S.-led side of the world, that this Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa group of countries, it stands to hold. But when they have meetings like they have this week, and you see the heads of state from India and China and Russia all meeting and getting together, I don't think that's a good sign at all for the Western alliance and Western countries and the U.S.-led coalition, which Canada is right there and needs to be right there, playing right wing to the U.S., centering that line. To me, the talk of their own grain exchange and some other things this week, I'm not sure how practical that is. All of these countries like to definitely intervene in their markets, and so I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that they'll come to anything that amounts to much there. But the fact that they're talking about participating and showing signs of working together, not a good sign, and certainly something that has to be concerning in Washington and in Ottawa as well, and other the European Union countries as well.
Well, I think it also shows, Tyler, the mounting challenges that Canada has trying to navigate through all this, right? A lot of criticism, the Canadian government's inability to have good relationships with India and China as major buyers of Canadian product on a diplomatic side. And then you got the U.S., trying to go more insular and more protectionist on both sides of the aisle. We're in a bit of a kind of real caught in the middle here, so to speak, at a time where we probably should be trying to sort out how we align and work more collaboratively with some of our partners, but I'm not sure they're so willing.
Well, at first, Kelvin said that this is causing cause for concern in Washington and capitals around the world. It should be cause for concern on farms around the world. If you're marketing commodities into international markets that are at risk of significant volatility and disruption because of this is something that you should be worried about and concerned about. I think at the end of the day, Canada can't find a way to be on both sides of this issue. We are very strategically linked to the United States, far and away our number one trading partner. Our exports, our ag and food exports to the U.S. are actually increasing as a share of our total exports. So we're seeing greater dependency on the U.S. market, not less. And ultimately what we need to do is, I think, find a better way to improve our relationships with the United States first and foremost. And that does come from things like greater investments in defense, greater kind of stances and a more aggressive approach on the world stage. And I hope that we see more of that coming out of Ottawa.
Yeah, it sounds like you're singing from my song sheet right there. Well put. Okay, Tyler, have yourself a great weekend.
Thank you.
Kelvin, I know we'll be talking again here today, but all the best.
Thanks, Shaun. Have a good weekend, everyone. And if you're in Saskatchewan, don't forget to vote. We'll be following the election results next week.
That's another close one. We're going to definitely have something to talk about next week when the results come out from the Saskatchewan election. Okay, if you have any feedback, send us an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. And, of course, we'll chat again next week. Cheers, everybody.